views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of Meetings of the Minds in partnership with BronxNet Television. These segments were born out of the necessity of keeping our members connected so that we can continue to partner with one another, continue to be a resource for each other, and find ways to still give back to our communities. We are still a membership organization. So if you are not yet a member, I encourage you to visit our website, www.hispanicchamber.nyc. That's www.hispanicchamber.nyc, and join our familia. It is very important to keep this going and keep us all in unity. The goal of this particular segment of Meetings of the Minds will be diversity and inclusion in the corporate work environment. Today, we are speaking with Elizabeth Agosto, the Global Chief Operating Officer for the Information Security Division at BNY Mellon. In her role, she is focused on optimizing operational process, driving key change and transformation initiative, and designing a framework to implement strategy into operations. Her responsibility include working closely with human resource to deliver on ISD's talent management strategies. So we're gonna find out what all this means in just a few seconds. Hi, Liz, how are you?
Hi, how are you? Thank you so much for having me here. I'm so excited to be here with you today and just talk about one of my favorite topics, which is diversity. I like to say diversity, equality, and inclusion. It's how I like to call it. Definitely happy to be here. One of the things that we're doing some real exciting things at BNY Mellon as it relates to diversity, equality, and inclusion. Certainly something, as I mentioned earlier, I'm super passionate about. And so let me tell you a little bit about, you talked about my role in the information security space, which most people understand it to be cybersecurity. And that's like securing, obviously client information as it relates to all things data, right? I joined the organization about 5 years ago in a COO capacity. And basically what that is managing the overall business, right? You know, the CEO of a company has a vision and a mission on what he wants to do across the entire organization. And the different divisions within the organization have a chief operating officer, and those chief operating officers within each of the divisions make sure that for each of the divisions that they're managing the business for, that they're meeting their goals, their objectives, and getting to obviously doing what we said we were going to do. So what I do in my role is just ensuring that, we keep our promise, right? That we get there and we get there in a good place. And obviously, making sure our goals are met, making sure that we're driving efficiencies, making sure that we're meeting our strategy objectives, and ultimately, obviously, ensuring that, we do what's best for the client always, right?
This is quite a unique role because you are a Latina in this
right.
huge corporate arena. You're basically keeping the doors of opportunities open to us, right? So, let's talk about your hiring goals. When it came to diversifying the workforce at BNY Mellon environment, how important was that to you and how challenging was it?
So coming into cybersecurity, as you mentioned, Sulma, very good points, right? Because I am a woman, I am a Latina, and I'm a woman of color, right? So those are three really important things to note, especially as it relates to technology. But when you talk about cybersecurity, you're throwing in a completely different lens into it. It's a very, very niche space. So when I first joined Information Security Division, I didn't realize just how much of a unicorn I actually was. And so, looking around, the organization, I said, wow, you know what, we lack diversity, right? But it's not a BNY Mellon issue alone, right? A lot of companies are having a hard time, not only finding the right talent, because that's an entirely different issue altogether. They're very hard to fill roles, very niche. And then you couple that with diversity and inclusion, it becomes a bigger issue, right, to tackle. So one of the things I'm really focused on, I said, how do I do this? How do we make sure that we meet our talent acquisition goals, but do it in a way where we are creating opportunities and closing that opportunity divide for people of color? And so I think certainly we have to be intentional, right? We're not going to get there unless we're intentional. And that's the first part, right? Is understanding what are the goals, how do we do it, and where do we go to find this talent? So I'm very sort of focused and driven to make sure that I find that talent, that technology talent, specifically in the Hispanic and African American communities. So I partner with organizations such as High Tech, Hispanic Information Technology Executive Council, which has a really big focus on Latinx talent in the area of technology. I also partner with an organization called ITSMF. So it's IT Senior Management Forum. And this organization focuses on, technology senior talent with people of color. And so working very closely with these two organizations, as well as other organizations such as Year Up, right, which again focuses on creating opportunities and closing that opportunity divide for diverse, underrepresented talent. We've been very lucky and fortunate rather to ensure that we are filling our requisitions and bringing in talent, but that we have a very focused and intentional diversity and inclusion lens.
No, and it seems to me that you hit all the right buttons. At this point, it's about partnership, and networking. And we've worked with the Europe organization. They're really big on, teaching youth how to navigate the corporate arena, right? And these kids come from our communities, and
That's
they're
right.
well versed. They're so articulate, and they're some of the hardest working young people that we.
Yes.
The chamber, even as mentioned. It was an incredible, they're an incredible organization. So I like that I'm hearing that partnerships are important. You knew exactly who to go to. Now, how did you educate corporate, right? Predominantly people that do not look like you, on why this was so important and why this was a priority?
I think sometimes, it may sound a little cliche, but sometimes talk is cheap, right? So I'm the kind of person, I'm a doer. So I feel that, if people see what's going on and they see that you're out there and you're making moves and you're talking to people and the programs are successful, then that kind of speaks for itself. So I'll use Europe as an example. When I was first introduced to Europe by a colleague of mine in the HR space, they told me about the program and I said, let me go check it out and talk to these folks and understand what the program is about. I did that, and they didn't have a technical stream. And more importantly, they didn't have a cybersecurity stream. So I said, okay, that's my opportunity to get in there and close that gap. And so it entailed me working very closely with the folks at the Europe space to make sure that we created those opportunities, that we helped put together a program that made sense for cyber folks to get what they need, but at the same time, the Europe students can also get the opportunities. And when people started to notice the success behind that, it was just natural that they came on board, right? So I think it's a big part of, again, being intentional, partnering with the right people. And then when people start seeing that, oh, wow, it's working and this is a good program, and you have these kids who, come from adversity and they work really hard and they're really intentional about it, then people say, wow, I want to do that too. And that's kind of how it happened. It sort of happened a little organically, if you will.
So let me ask you this. Do you ever get, I guess, for lack of a better word, pigeonhole and people in your corporate arena saying, hey, that's a Liz hire, another Liz hire, another Liz hire? How was that experience for you?
We started tracking it, right? Because I think data is the biggest thing, right? If you want to track results. So in the beginning, we would bring these folks in and see, okay, what works, what doesn't work. And then we would do a lessons learned, sort of a little business case afterwards. Okay, well, we had this issue. We're going to find a resolve for that. So the next round, we won't have that. Okay, but there's always going to be something, right? And I guess just educating people on the program and the beauty of the program, and that there is a win-win situation. And then after a while, my own CISO recognizes the program for what it is, very, very pleased with the results. And he wants us to go at scale, right? He wants us to scale this program and say, we want more of this. But I wanted to make sure that when we bring these students in and we bring these kids in, that they're going to come in and they're going to feel like they belong. And part of that is making sure that I'm working with my managers and the managers that do take on, a hire from a year up program, as an example, that these are people that understand that this is a big responsibility, right? That it's not just, we're going to give you a hire and they're just going to work and that's it. It is a commitment on both ends. Mm-hmm. So the kids are going to give themselves, they're going to give the most of themselves, but at the same time, I want to create that experience for them. Because if we create that experience and they come in and they feel wanted and like they belong, well, guess what? They're going to give of themselves tremendously. They're also going to tell their friends about it. And this is kind of how it works, right? And so when we have negative experiences, because we're going to have negative experiences, just whether you hire from Europe or otherwise, right? It's learning from those mistakes, continuously educating people and having that open door for my managers to come to me and say, hey, this didn't work because of this. Let's figure it out. So that's what I have, is that sort of open door. Good, bad, whatever feedback is good feedback. So
Liz, when I hear you speak, it really takes me back to my fresh out of college days and how I ended up in this environment called digital advertising when there was pretty much no one that looked like me. At all. When I spoke to my vanilla coworkers, many of them were even from different states, all different types of universities. I went to a CUNY, so I was already insecure. I come from the Bronx, so I was insecure. I didn't know who I was, so I was insecure. And when I hear you speak, I see the value of having one of us in there to help navigate, that environment, because it's a culture shock, not just for me. I could imagine it was a culture shock for, my vanilla coworkers. And I tell you one thing, I failed because I did not have anyone helping me navigate or even communicating to corporate about how to help someone like me. So, just by you telling us that story helps tremendously. And you say it with such courage and so much strength and power that I hope that people in your position, beautiful women of color, Latina, are doing the same thing and having those types of conversation. It almost seems like it's not even an uncomfortable conversation for you. It's we're going to do this and this is how we're going to do it type of conversation. I want to ask you just really quickly, in light of the social justice movement that have transpired, do you believe that the corporate environment is now woke? If so, what are they woke about? And how will BNY Mellon, for example, or what are they going to do or what are they doing right now to help, communities of color?
I absolutely think everybody is woke, right? I mean, even people like myself who, for me, this work is not necessarily, I want to say, a part of my job. It's more a calling for me. It always has been a calling, irrespective of where I've been. Funnily enough, it's always been something I've been driven to and people know that I'm passionate about. I think it is a time when people are woke, and I think people are starting to get very curious and want to understand. In some cases, it's a learning experience for many. And, I think this is an incredible time for us to say, look, this is our time. Let's roll up our sleeves. Let's work with people. And whether you're white or black or whatever color, background, ethnicity you are, let's work together to make a change and create real impact. I'm really, really proud of my organization at this point. I'm happy to be a member of this organization, extremely proud, because I've seen how much, they've taken it very seriously. They've put in place a lot of, different programs, and they're working with me and asking me questions and asking people questions and encouraging people to get involved. And I think that's really what it's about, right? I want my fellow, white colleagues and employees to feel like we're in a partnership. We're all learning. And, having these courageous conversations, having this dialogue about what we can do, that's the beginning, right? We weren't having those discussions because in the past people were afraid to raise it, right? So I think just being open and courageous and involving everybody and saying this is not just a BNY Mellon problem as an example. This is a industry-wide, whatever type of business that you're in, whether you're in a small mom and pop or you're in a sneaker, industry, or you're in a technology or an investment banking, this is our moment. This is the time to have these discussions, and this is the time to make the change. And we need people that are up for the challenge.
Liz, you've been ahead of your time. You've been ahead of your time. You've educated, you've taught, you opened up doors of opportunities, you created partnerships, you're educating your white coworkers and consistently do so. What's next for you? Like, what does it mean to go deeper in the mind of Liz? What do you want to see?
I want to see a culture shift. I want to see a culture shift. I want to see people being intentional. And I think this is a moment of growth, and it's a reckoning, right? It's like we all realize that in some case or other, we all have biases, all of us, myself included, right? We all have biases. And I think, for me, what I'd like to see is a complete culture shift across the organization, across different industries, where everybody is being intentional, and that there's no room anymore to say, well, I didn't know that, or I wasn't aware, right? I think this is a time for us to all educate ourselves on the different cultural experiences. What does it mean to be an African-American person? What does it mean to be a Latina, an Afro-Latina? What does that mean, right? And not to be afraid of asking those questions. I certainly want to be a catalyst, if not a conduit to ensure that people get it. I'm going to work as hard as I have to make sure that change is made. And for me, it never seems like something I get tired of doing. So I'll use my voice as a platform. I'll use my role as a platform to ensure that we get there. I'm not sure what's next, but I know whatever it is, I'm up for the challenge for sure.
No, that's fantastic. And we see that a lot. You mentioned, what it means to be a Latino, what it means to be an African-American and Afro-Latino. There's been a lot of disparities even in our own Latino community. How do you think that we need to start bridging those gaps and work together as one? Number one, being grateful for our African-American communities and all of their sacrifices that allowed us to even be here and have this conversation in the first place. And number two, how do you think that where do you think we need to start closing these disparities between the vanilla Latinos and the chocolate brown toffee Latinos?
That's right. I think it goes back to education. I mean, you'd be surprised how many people just don't know history. The history of, the movement, the history, why did it even came up, or what is Black Lives Matter? Why are we doing this? And why are people angry? What is it like? Why are people all of a sudden get woke? I think if we start delving and really understanding, stepping outside of our own comfort zones and understanding and learning about the different cultures and what makes us so incredible, right? Because I think, we going into a restaurant or watching a movie about the African-American experience and the history of what people have gone through, just like we learn about the Holocaust. I was once asked to moderate a panel about the Holocaust, and it was the most eye-opening, most incredible experience in my entire life. I really started to learn about what happened. You hear about the Holocaust and you're like, oh, okay, I understand that this happened and what have you. But when I started to really, really deeply understand the background and the history of what truly happened, it woke something in me. And so I'm saying, I'm very invested in learning about different cultures, understanding different cultural experiences, what the Black experience, the Latinx experience, like really learning about it. There's so many books, there's movies. I would say to people, suggest books that they can read, movies for them to watch, just so that they can start understanding the why. Because when you understand the why, then you start making it like, oh, this is just people starting trouble or what have you. No, there's real pain and adversity and challenges. And we need to start being ambassadors and creating ambassadors, right? So if we have to follow, we have to help people follow by example, right? And it starts in the home. It starts, I would even say kids. I think kids are the ones now, our generation, are teaching the parents about what all of this is about. I've heard a lot of stories about that, where the parents ask the kids questions like, what does that mean? And when is it okay to use this word or not? And I think it's education. It's educating ourselves on different cultures and stepping outside of our comfort zones and getting to know someone else's life experience a little bit and asking questions.
Yeah. and be open to the answers, right? And be prepared for the answers. You ask a question because the answers may not come out, how you feel it should have came out, but it's also a process on both ends for both.
Right.
How do organizations like the New York City Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, how do you see us helping a big company like BNY Mellon, or how do you foresee our partnership in the future? Mm-hmm.
I think there should be more programs, and again, I'm myself learning about what is out there. I think, I've heard from a number of people where they're like, there's so many programs about this or that can help educate people, or opportunities to help, Hispanics and people of color. I think putting it out there a little bit more, like just letting people know what benefits are out there and how we can partner. And guess what? I'm big on, if it doesn't exist, let's talk about creating something, right? The sky's the limit. I just, if I ask, hey, is there a program that maybe, big corporations can partner with with like the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce and see what we can do to drive some kind of a sponsorship, some kind of a partnership, something where we can go out there and help sponsor and you do what you do well, right? And then we can fund it to some degree to bring it to scale, right? Let's talk about, if it doesn't exist, what do we need? And let's talk about how we make it happen. And I think that can happen with so many other organizations. And I think it's just about having those conversations. What's your passion project? What's your superpower? And then us as an organization, we say, well, what's ours? What can we do to help? What can we do to be intentional? And what can we do to help drive that change and create real lasting impact? And I think those conversations should be ongoing.
No, I love what you said about superpower. And I think that all of us have superpowers. We have our own talent, and it's all about what's not out there, what doesn't exist, and how we can make it happen. And that could only happen through collaboration. I really appreciate you being open to this conversation. And this is just the beginning, or part 2, or our next chapter. But I think there's some work that we can definitely do together, Liz, and we'll be more than happy to partner with a doer like yourself. So we appreciate you. Don't get tired of educating, and don't forget you have an entire community that's rooting for you, supports you, and will always be clapping their hands for you. So thank you so much, Liz, for being here.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Thank you very much.